after, what's key about this is during the time and right after, during the time of the apostasy, after the Solomonic time, apostasy time, and then after exile, we find that Yah becomes attached to many of the names. But there are many prophets such as Obadiah, servant of the one he who is the living one, of Yah. Zechariah, the remembrance of the one who is the living one. Yeshayahu, or Yeshayahu, the salvation, the Shua, Shaya of the one who is alive, one's living one. Zephaniah, that Yah, the living one, either hides or the hiding of he who is the living one. And then there's the phrase, hallelujah. And remember, Yah here is either, depends on which particular scroll you're looking at, either it's a bi-grammaton or it's a unigram. One means praises to the one who is the living one. So we think we went a little bit over time on this right here, but just to wrap that up and just to connect that right there, it's very important to understand and to know the differences between what Yahweh, or the Yod-He-Waw-He, which more properly pronounced is Yahweh. Not just Yahweh, but Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahweh. And it's because of that particular Ethiopic H, that breathy H from the ancient Hebraics, that the U sound can glide in there between the H and the W. But the true secret is the hidden hand in Yahweh. There's a hidden hand in Yahweh. Actually, Yahweh is a second person, or actually the third person, because the second person is you. The third person is he, she. So when Yahweh first spoke to describe himself to Musa, he said, Ahya, or Ahya, Ahya, Shara Ahya, that I am the one who's alive and causes to live, to say the life giver. And now when Musa is told to tell them that the Ahya in Exodus 3 and 14 have sent thee, he could not say that I am has sent me, because they'll say, wait, Moses, we know you, but what's wrong with you? So he couldn't say Ahya. He had to say it in the next logical. See, this is Hebrew logic. This is why a lot of people struggle and they wrestle over what does Ahya Shara Ahya mean, or I am that I am, and then they confuse Yahweh, which is describing the one who said Ahya Shara Ahya. So what we have is the first person, Ahya, and then we have the third person, the one who's describing the one who originally said Ahya, saying Yah. And then the hidden hand within Yahweh makes the W, or the wow sound, actually a sound, because A is a diphthong, and in the Ethiopic and Hebrew, a diphthong is produced by two other letters. But within the Ethiopic, it can be encoded, and within certain of the nukta, the nukud in the Hebrew, which is actually, what's the word, the nekwit, we say in the Ethiopic, nekwit, or the dots, or the yota, where Christ says the jots and the tittle, because the language that was truly known to be the holy Shemitic language was actually what we call today the Ethiopic, or the Ethiopic is Shemitic language, because it has those jots and tittle. You see, when you now start to look at so-called the history of the Masoretics, it's later on that these dots and everything was added into the modern Masoretic, so-called Jewish. Later on, they try to attribute it to Ezra, but if they do, there's another Ethiopic link, because the Old Testament, the scrolls of the prophets, actually were acquired by Ezra during Ezra and Nehemiah's time, from Ethiopia, because of that Beit Israel presence there. So what a lot of the black Hebrew Israelites don't do, unfortunately, you understand, is go to an independent source from the Ashkenazi, the Khazars, the ones they call Esau. And that independent source was cut off because of the rumor and dissimulation out against the King of Kings and out against the Ethiopian Hebrews. So instead of going to the Ethiopic code, now one will say, well, how come the so-called Falashas, so the so-called Beit Israel, Why they don't speak any Hebrew? See, that's another trick they play with you when they say that the Beta Israel, the Falashas, don't speak any Hebrew. See, they con the Beta Israel, the Falashas, to make them think that the Ethiopic has no relation with the Hebrew, and what many of them are now finding by learning the so-called Jewish version modern Hebrew, the Yiddishized Hebrew, is that when they really look at what these words mean, these words are really Ethiopic. So then how do we call Ethiopia Hamitic when the language is Ethiopic is Shemitic? What's going on there? So that totally destroys the racist misinterpretation of the Table of Nations. Because what they're trying to do is say, well, everything is just from this one point in time, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, all different races. That's what they try to tell us. So was Noah and his wife different races? Were there different races before? How is one man and one woman going to have different race children? See, they never really explained these things. You understand? But they use that in order to run the slave trade. They use that in order to enslave the majority of the world, because the majority of the world are non-white peoples. You understand? So the non-black peoples, the Gentiles, enslaved the non-white peoples, and they were able to come to full rulership when the Beta Israel came into captivity. And though many of us may recognize our Beta Israel or Hebrew link through our experience and through the prophecy, them cutting off Ethiopia and the Qedus and Ethiopic from the studies still keeps them as half original, half civilized. They know a little bit about their identity, but they're following the same Esau, the Edomite, instead of going to the Ethiopic, because the same Esau and the Edomite has told them that the Ethiopians are Cushites, which is partially true, speaking of the land and the country, but they totally dismiss the Shemitic presence. But the testimony to the Shemitic presence, which is to say Shem is to say the name, the Shemitic presence in Ethiopia is the language. How is the ancient Qedus? And they say to us, this is how they lie as well. And we're going to wrap up right here, but they lie and say, actually, the Qedus, the Ethiopic, they try to tell us, they try to make us believe, it came in from Arabic invaders. All right? They say Arabic invaders invaded and brought the Ethiopic Fidel and chart, this well-organized chart that has 7 orders and anywhere from the 26 of the Qedus to the 33 of the Amarinya, the show in the Royal Amharic, and they'll say to us, well, this was brought in. You see, this was brought in. They'll say the Ethiopic was brought in by Arab invaders, and then they'll tell us a little bit later on, Amharic developed and also developed additional letters, particularly tuned not to Arabic-speaking languages, but to African and black mouths and black speakers. You see, so we have to ask ourselves, well, if Arab invaders brought the Ethiopic, right, according to what they tell us, it's semitic, a.k.a. Arab invaders, Middle Eastern type, then how come we don't find none of these Middle Eastern type people, language, Arabic, sounding like Ethiopic? I'm talking about in its refinement. How come the language was, where they brought in, they gave the Ethiopians a greater language than the Arabic, how come they still use Arabic? You understand? Which is not as rich as the Ethiopic and not as orderly as the Ethiopic. You see what I'm saying? So they're lying to us when they tell us that so-called Arab invaders brought this in, because they're trying to say that, well, black people, people of color, you understand, or really black people, the native people, God's people, never even had anything. This is another lie from the pit of hell, just like the lie about Yahweh or the YHWH being satanic. You understand? Who is saying that? The Satanists. You understand? And don't flatter them by calling them Luciferian, because they are totally devoid of light and they don't give any light. It's a false light. It's an artificial light. It's backlighting. It's not true lighting. It's like when you see a street light on and the sun is bright. Sometimes you don't even see the street light was on. You understand? Because the street light doesn't compare to the sun, the true light, in that comparison right there. So this is a little bit wrap up. We went actually into 2 parts of this, but to address some very important information that really needs to be understood. The differences between I am that I am and he is who he is, and what the am and is really mean. Like what is. You understand? I never thought I would have an opportunity to use that. What does is mean? What does am? What does am mean in that sense? That am and that is not pronoun to say like he is, but to say the one who lives. The one who is the living one, as well as the one who causes to live. The one who is the life giver. And it becomes very clear how that concept, that true concept of the true God will be revived through our Coptic Hebrew brother Muse, when we understand what particular time period they were living in Egypt and what was the popular religion of Egypt at that time. It was not the God of the living, but Egypt has fallen to the God of the dead. It may upset some Egyptologists, but they have to get up on this Ethiopic and start playing games. So more to come, Yah willing.